Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session. We are so excited to meet you all. We will be starting soon. With me, Dr. Selma, our speaker for today. So,
Hi,
okay,
Dr.
so
Mona.
thank you. Thank you, Doctor. So, while we are starting and before we start introducing the IVPN network, before we start introducing the topic and our amazing speaker, I would like to hear from you. Let's warm up and break the ice. I'd like to hear from you your background. If you are clinical research, if you are clinical researcher or regulatory affairs professionals or PV professional, or you are aspirant like you are clinical research enthusiast or regulatory affairs. So I'll be posting. Hi everyone. Hi. So I'll be posting here. Please, if you are clinical researcher, write 1. If you are regulatory affairs or pharmacovigilance practitioner, write 2. If you are aspirant like student, fresh graduate, or someone who would like to shift their career, please write here. Okay, amazing. We have regulatory affairs professionals up till now. Wafa, Kalthum. Okay, Rawan. You want to investigate today? Okay. Dina. Okay, clinical research. Amazing. So I'll come back and read all your backgrounds. But first, let me introduce IVPN network. For those who are attending for the first time, IVPN was founded as a listserv in 2012. IVPN network covers all aspects of pharmacy practice, leadership, and research. In July 2020, IVPN network has started offering additional services and programs intended to reshape and transform the pharmacy practice in our region and beyond. IVPN network has number of listservs, or you can say sections, led by subject matter experts reporting to our IVPN network president, Dr. Osama Tabara. Regarding the listservs, I am pleased to announce that this is the first collaborative project between IVPN Regulatory Affairs and IVPN Journal Club. Let me start with the IVPN Regulatory Affairs listserv. It's, you can say, group of regulatory affairs professionals and enthusiasts who are led by Dr. Mona Mosley. The listserv mission is to promote the profession of healthcare regulatory affairs globally. And the objectives are going around mentorship, raising awareness, networking, and exposing talents to the world, plus keeping the professionals up to date with the regulations. Moving for the Journal Club mission, it's to share the latest published evidence, to learn from experts in analyzing primary literature, also to optimize the clinical practice, and to equip audience with the most credible advancements in the field of clinical trials and journals publishing. So I believe now we are starting to increase, but let me see. So we have, I believe we have like good mix of regulatory affairs professionals. We have good mix of researchers and also of people who are trying to know more about both the fields. Meanwhile, let me introduce Dr. Selma Kita. She is Director of Clinical Operations and Regulatory Affairs with more than 16 years of experience in regulatory intelligence, project management, and clinical research. She was involved in more than 150 trials, including all the phases, from phase 1 to phase 4, and including different therapeutic indications with extensive focus on the infectious emerging diseases, like SARS-2-CoV, meningitis, polio, Ebola, and rare diseases. For the past few years, Dr. Salma oversaw clinical operations in more than 30 countries. She was the Director of Clinical Operations and Director of Regulatory Affairs Africa at MCT CRO. And I would like to congratulate her now for her position, which she recently joined, ICON, as a project director.
Thank you for this great welcome.
Thank you for
Really.
being with us.
And it's a huge pleasure for me.
I'm so excited to attend this session, and I hope you are joining me with this enthusiasm. Clinical trials regulation, it's a very important topic. Clinical trials are performed to investigate the safety and efficacy of human medicine, and they are carried out in human volunteers. The regulation of clinical trials are enforced on the trial sponsors in order to ensure the safety of these volunteers and also the effectiveness of these trials. Dr. Salma will take us in a very interesting journey in this presentation, and she will give you a very nice news. We will speak about it after her session. I will, without any further ado, I'll not take from her time so much. So I will let her start. Now, please, the floor is yours.
Good. Let me share my screen. Tell me when you can see it. Can you see my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Okay, so as introduced by Rafa, today we are going to cover a global subject, what is a clinical trial from regulation to bedside, but we will start with an overall overview on the clinical trial regulation. So what is...
Doctor, I don't want to interrupt you, but if we can make it like full screen.
I'm already in full screen.
Because we have 2 slides appearing.
I don't know. What are the options? That
maybe this one?
Is
it's
it
clear? It's clear, but I thought maybe if we can have it as
one second, because I'm using a monitor, maybe because I'm connected to a monitor. Did anything change?
Yes.
Yeah, because I'm connected to a second screen. This is why.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so I was saying, okay, I lost my mouse. No problem. So what are the objectives of this first session? First, we will go with an example. Yeah, exactly. I will not start with a huge definition and the regulation. No, I want to show you a true example from what happened during the recent pandemic. Because we will get some lesson learned from it, then we will go to what is the regulation that was in place and that we did apply. We will take UAE as a case study, given that most of the audience is coming from Gulf country, and we will conclude with what is next. And this is what I like most, because regulation is a life element. It is something dynamic that needs always improvement. And this is why we are all here. Yes, to be trained to know what is going on now, but we all together, we need to join our effort for a better clinical trial and a more stronger regulation in our region. And when I say region, I'm always referring to Middle East and Africa, because this is my beloved region, even though I'm based in Europe. So first of all, I'm sorry, yes, I said no definition, but we need at least to agree all together what is a clinical trial based on ICH GCP. GCP is the acronym of good clinical practice in the ICH region. These guidelines were updated. This is why there is a new version called R2. So when we say the word clinical mean inhuman. So when we do anything in a human being, we say it is a clinical. And the word trial means experimentation. So this is what is a clinical trial. Now that you understand this through this easy example, you can understand if someone give you an example, if he's doing clinical trial or no. And the purpose of this trial is to prove pharmacological, pharmacodynamic, pharmacokinetic effect, but also safety. Because in clinical trial, it's not only about proving that a drug is efficient in a disease, but it should go with also a safer profile, because sometimes it happens that the drug is highly efficient. In parallel, it has a very bad safety profile, and this is why such a drug will never get a marketing authorization. So this is what is a clinical trial in my field. So what happened, and what is the usual development process, let's say, of a drug and the molecule? When usually, and before Corona, when a pharma industry or a biotech, an institution, anyone discover a new entity in a preclinical phase, meaning they started testing it in laboratory or in animal, and it proved that it can be safe and efficient in a specific indication, they move to the clinical phase, meaning they want to test it in human. So they will start through a sequential process. This process might last from 10 to 15 years, really. So always we start with phase 1 in a few limited participants in a very strict condition, simply to prove the safety of the drug. If this step is confirmed, people that got this drug, they didn't die or they didn't got very harsh side effects, the pharma sponsor might move to phase 2. And every time we move from a phase to another in sequential mode, the number of participants will increase. We might go, for example, in vaccination trial to 1,000, for example, something like 30,000 participants. In phase 2, our goal is going to be to check again the safety profile of the drug, but also the efficiency. Usually we start testing several doses, then we will keep the most efficient and safe one to move to phase 3. Phase 3, this is the biggest one. So as told you, it can go in 1,000 patients when it's a common indication, but sometimes when we work in rare disease and we have so many in our region, it can go only in 50, 100 of patients. And it takes longest time. On phase 3, this is the most important phase, because after it, if we prove that the drug is safe and efficient, here the sponsor will submit a marketing authorization dossier. And if it is accepted by health authority, the drug will start being marketed. But you might say, it is fine, we did it, I don't know for how many years and how many patients, we want in sequential mode. No, because the drug is a life element, so it will not stop. Even if the drug is marketed, there are different clinical trial possible, and we call them phase 4 or post-marketing study, because when a drug is marketed, it will be dispensed to all people. There will be no more eligibility criteria and exclusion of some population. So we might see more side effect than what we did before, because before we had strict exclusion and inclusion criteria. So this is the usual clinical development plan before COVID. What happened when we started having this exceptional pandemic from 2 years? So I took the example of a vaccine. So previously, this is the process in your left of a clinical development plan as I detailed now for a vaccine or any molecule. With COVID, and because all human beings were at risk, it impacted the whole world. The whole process was moved in few months. So as you can see, previously the vaccine or the drug became available After all study finished, the report edited, and marketing authorization released. Here, for COVID-19, the vaccine became available right after phase 3 termination. And as you can see, the 3 phases were mixed together, really. In COVID-19, we did phase 2 with phase 3. In parallel, we submitted a request of approval for both phases together, and it was accepted. And in parallel, the vaccine, they didn't got full marketing authorization, but they got an emergency use because the situation was so urgent that we needed something to treat or prevent the spread of the disease. And what I wanted to show you through this example, a real one that we all survived to it, thanks God, is regulation is not something written in stone. This is what you are, all of you from regulatory or interested in to take part or do a career in regulatory. This is what is really important. What I want you to keep in mind is that regulatory is a mindset. Is not, we don't need someone just to read text and apply it. No, you are pharmacist, doctor, assistant, you have a strong scientific background. We expect more from you. We need you to know how to use this text for the patient benefit and to heal and to support patients in their fight and doctors with diseases. So what we learned is this kind of flexibility. Even though it was the same regulation in place, but it became flexible and simplified. For example, during COVID-19, we've been able to submit for fast track, meaning that health authority, they were reviewing the application and the request in few days. Really, for example, in Europe, it was in 3 days they were reviewing the application, things that previously was taking month and month. Also, the regulatory affairs at Ministry of Health were organized in task force. No one had time to take vacation or say, I don't have time now. No, the situation was so dramatic that they had to work day and night to find solution. In Africa, the region where I used to work, all this was already in place because unfortunately for Africa, they are used to this kind of epidemic. So they just reactivated the process. They didn't set it from scratch. During COVID-19, we learned also that, for example, you know, we are all working in submitting different kind of requests to health authority. Usually, if you don't have a full package, you can submit. But during COVID, rolling submission was accepted, meaning you can submit a partial package, then you complete it. And in parallel of your package completion, the health authority review your request, which is really great. And all of this reinforces the collaboration between all clinical trial stakeholders for the benefit of all human beings. Also, we discovered this new design of clinical trial named seamless trial, meaning mixing phases. So it's no more a sequential development plan. It became a kind of semi-parallel plan. So I'm sure now, after all what happened to all of us recently, we will not get back to the old-fashioned system. And we learned a lot in how we did prove how we can do things faster and better, because finally there was multiple therapeutic solution in place. And so this is why I'm going to take you to the clinical research regulation. What it was this regulation that allowed all this flexibility, and what was the red line that we shouldn't cross, even though in a pandemic situation. So to start with this, we need to understand some legal term first. So in regulatory field, there is a kind of hierarchy, starting with the guideline. Guideline is like a working instruction document. It helps you understand how you can use a directive or a regulation. It's more detailed. So in clinical trial, we talk about GCP, good clinical practice. We have also to stick with good manufacturing practice in some aspects. Then we have more strict rules under the directive, but the directive, like it is named, it gives you the direction to where to go. So it directs you to a specific goal. But the strict level of regulation is called regulation. And currently, I can tell you that in Europe, they are working in implementing the clinical trial regulation, that it will impact the whole field. And also, if you go and check what the website of, for example, the UK Health Authority or the European one, you will see that they are all working actively in updating their guideline after all what they learned during the pandemic phase. So several times I told you about good clinical practice. So what it is? It's a standard for designating, conducting, recording, and reporting trials that involve participation of human subjects. Anyone, really, anyone working in clinical trial should be trained on good clinical practice. If you are a nurse, coordinator, doctor, pharmacist, even the person handling biological sample, lab technician, anyone should be trained, and not only once. Because again, as I told you, in our field, we have the chance that we need to be trained all the time. You can't build your experience and your career in a training you took, I don't know, 5 years ago. It will become old-fashioned. You will not have the last state of information. Usually, ICH GCP training should be renewed every 2 to 3 years. It depends on the country requirements, which is really great because we need to work and invest in ourselves to be trained like you are doing today. And this is really great because I know that it is night where you are, while for me it's still 7. But really, it's great that you are doing this, and I encourage you to continue like this. So what are the goals of good clinical practice? And this is our ultimate goal to all of us. Whatever the field we are involved in, we need to work actively to safeguard the right, safety, and well-being of trial subject or patients, because this is our ultimate goal to all of us. And this GCP initially did apply in the ICH region, that is Europe, Japan, and United States. However, now anyone, even working, I don't know, in South Africa, Australia, anywhere in this world, if they want to conduct a clinical trial, they need to stick with ICH GCP. This is our common ground to all of us. Now let's move to the UAE regulation, just as an example. So in addition to ICH GCP, we did agree all together that this is the minimal level that we need to respect. This is, no one can negotiate it. You can't have a regulation in a country or a region easier than ICH GCP. No, this is the starting point. To which countries can add additional requirements. So in UAE, they worked in their guideline. Recently, they released a new one in January 2020. Plus, they request that anyone conducting clinical trials should stick with GCI requirements. And for medical device trial, you need to be ISO certified for clinical investigation. So these are the minimum level of regulation that they need to stick with. So now that we reviewed the reference, what are the principles? What are these red lines really? Because again, what is important in our work, because we are all pharmacists or a highly educated person, we need to know what will drive our decision in our daily work. To be able to take good decision, because you will face many problems, our work is resolving issue. You need to understand what are the red lines that you shouldn't cross. And in clinical trial, we have so many, because again, we are testing experimental drug or devices in a human being. This is not a game. This is highly risky. So first thing, we can't do something that is not ethical. always, I give you an advice, always imagine that the clinical trial you are going to work with, it will involve someone from your family. Will you accept, for example, I don't know, in a dermatology trial that they are going to do MRI every month? So all the time, think of it from ethical point of view. Then anyone involved, from the sponsor that will edit the protocol to the health authority to anyone conducting clinical trial, will always keep in mind and assess the benefits risk ratio. It should be justified. We can't get the subject taking more risk than the benefit. And even the patient that will be under placebo arm, we will tell them that maybe they will not get a direct benefit, but the data that we will collect from them will benefit to all other people, to the humanity. We need to tell them. And as I told you before, we will work daily to safeguard the right, safety, and well-being of participants. Any clinical trial that wants to be approved should provide a minimal level of non-clinical and clinical information to support the trial. And when we try to have a new clinical trial in place, it starts all the time with a clear and detailed protocol on which the sponsor will say, what is the rationale of this protocol? What are the eligibility criteria? What will happen in each patient visit? So the detailed process will be detailed, will be written in a protocol. But this protocol can't apply if it's not approved before by an independent ethics committee. As I told you previously, everything should be ethically sound. And we can't reach this step if there is no independent ethics committee that reviewed the protocol and give the green light to go. In a clinical trial, if someone will handle patient visits and made medical decision, this person should be a qualified physician or dentist. We can take, for example, a pharmacist to take medical decision. It's not possible. But what is good is anyone working in clinical trial should be qualified by education, training, and experience. And this is something also I already told you. You need all the time to be trained. I said, Rafa, I joined from 10 days a new company. I have 150 training to validate before being assigned in any task. Even with my 16 years of experience, it's not enough. And this is what is great. You are never so expert or senior to start without being trained. And this is also the first thing that any auditor will check. Every time they will start checking your CV and your training certificate. So people that want to develop, clinical trial can be a good place for you because you will never stop working and learning. And as I told you through the example of COVID-19, we discovered a new way of doing things. No one could imagine just before the start of the pandemic that we will work this way, that we will obtain approval in such short period. But it happened. So if you want to start, invest in yourself, be trained first. Then experience will come with time when you will be involved in clinical trial. Now let's talk about the patient, the participant. We talk about patient when we target a specific indication. We talk about participant when it is a vaccine trial involving healthy volunteer. The terminology in clinical trial is important. But today, as it's an introduction course, we will remain, we can call them patient or participant. So anyone that wants to take part to clinical trials should start first by giving his free consent, and this should be documented. We can't force someone to go in a clinical trial. You know, when I was preparing this training, I was thinking to add some slides about the historical part of clinical trial regulation. But I found it so big and there are so many things that I want to tell you, and 40 minutes will not be enough. So I said, okay, if they want, we will do a specific session just to go through the evolution of the clinical trial regulation, and how we reached this point today of ICGCP and all other regulations that we are seeing now. So if you want to tell Rafa, and we will cover it. But previously, I can tell you, even from even 1,800 years, it's clinical trials started, but without consenting people. They forced them. So can you imagine? Now, thanks God, this is no more possible. The other principle are the data. The data is important because, yes, we have to safeguard the right safety well-being of human subject, but also we need to collect reliable data. Otherwise, if we just test on them, we don't collect the data. So why we are doing this? We need to collect data with high level of integrity. But in parallel, we need to safeguard the confidentiality of our participant. We never, ever take the patient full name outside the participating site. This is more than a red line. If you want to be fired, try to do it. So this is not possible. Plus, in some country and more, there are strict rules of data privacy that apply. Sometimes you can't even take the initial of the patient. It's not his full name, his full date of birth, his gender, race, ethnicity. More and more, this is no more possible. Because again, we need to safeguard the right of this patient. When it comes to the drug that we are testing, of course, this drug should be manufactured, handled, the label also stored, everything per the good manufacturing practice, of course. And there is a dedicated annex on GMP just for the investigational drug. What was added during the last update of good clinical practice is the aspect of quality. It's not only about running clinical trial. No, if you want to do something, do it with highest level of quality. Otherwise, don't do it. So there are quality control and quality assurance aspect involved in each layer and each system. This is really important. And we are here, highly educated people. We need always to have as a goal to perform with highest quality, because people expect a lot from our side. So these were the principle. Now that we know them, what we are going to do with them when this regulation apply. I took as an example for you a clinical research study life cycle. So it started always with a development phase, meaning the sponsor, pharma, they have a drug. They want to test it. So we go and we submit it. We seek approval from an EC and a regulatory authority. Once we obtain all approval, we activate the participating site, meaning a position named clinical research associate will visit their site, will give them the required training, because what is good also in our field is not only that we need to be trained. No, we have also to train others. Then if the site are activated, they have everything, they can start recruiting. This is the conduct phase. They finish recruiting, delivering the drug. We clean the data because, as I told you already, it's all about the data collected. When the trial ends, the sponsor will release the clinical study report, the report where it will summarize all the result outcome that have been achieved through this clinical trial, and it will be closed archived. I can tell you that the regulatory requirement apply on each single step. For example, in Europe, it's mandatory when you have your first patient included to inform the health authority, simply because from this point, they will start receiving the safety information like the SAE, the serious adverse event. There is a huge difference between a trial that is obtained approval but didn't start, or a trial where there are patients ongoing one. This clinical study report should go also to health authority. And each single step we need to tell the health authority, which make the regulatory team highly important, and they should have a high level of expertise to handle. Because sometimes when you notify something, they might tell you, stop there. It happens. Your molecule is not efficient enough. So really, it's a dynamic process that continue and will follow any drug all the time. And how we apply this? I took as an example when we seek the first approval to conduct a trial. And I get back, of course, to our lovely country of UAE as an example. So based on the last regulation, what should be done if you want to conduct a clinical trial in UAE? Per the guideline, you can conduct a parallel submission, meaning you compile all your documents, for example, the protocol, the investigator brochure, the consent, or the insurance, all these documents, you submit them at the same time to the health authority and also the ET committee. In UAE, some sites have dual coverage, meaning you need to submit the request to a central ET committee, but also to a local one. Once they approve, it takes them, you can imagine, a long time, 60 to 90 calendar day, which is really long. You can start importing your drug in the country and the study can start. So as you can see, it's a long process, but nothing can be done before getting all approvals in place. So what is left to be done? I could have listed so many things, but let me summarize what we miss in our region. If we compare it to other region, is already the first thing is the harmonization within the same country and regionally. As I told you, for example, for UAE, some sites, they have the dual affiliation. They are covered by 2 EC and the MOH. This makes things longer and complex. Plus, there is no single harmonization. Each country is releasing their requirement by his own. Yes, our country are independent, which we respect and which is really good. But maybe if they worked all together to have a common ground of regulation, it will be more attractive. Because let me tell you, what we need all to work for is to have an easy regulation, not in terms with the patient safety, but it needs to be well understood from the sponsor, because they have their misperception of our region. They have some false idea. We need to change this. And if you want to attract more sponsors, we need to work in the timeline of getting approval. And unfortunately, in our region so far, this timeline are very long, but also non-reliable. If we are in Ramadan, if we are in summer vacation, if you are, I don't know where, it's a excuse to miss a deadline. This should stop really. If we want to attract very good and international clinical trial, we need to have more attractive and shorter timeline. And we need to adapt the process to digitalization. Now, what we learned also through the pandemic is we can submit electronically. Let's get rid from paperwork. Can you imagine in some country previously, if you have to submit a request, you need to provide 13 copies of the submission package. A submission package sometimes is constituted with 200 documents. Can you imagine the number of copies you need to bring? Plus, who will read all this? We know that it will not be read by all the committee. So why? So we need to understand, engage, and act all together, because one person can change things, but all together, yes, we can do it. And this is why part of this change that we look for in improvement, because it's not only about changing things. We just want to improve and be more attractive and bring more clinical trial to our region. What we did think of within the IVPN initiative is that we don't want to stop here. We want to take you for a long journey of training. Because again, when we started thinking about this initiative, the first thing I had in mind, okay, they want me to speak about regulation, but which one, which aspect, what I'm going to say, where to stop. So directly we had a call and we said, why not to do it through a list of training. We take it, I don't know, we are not in a hurry. It can take us 1 year. It's not a problem. For me, I'm here for you. So this is why we drafted a training curriculum covering the main aspect. But I can tell you this training curriculum can be extended. For example, there are new trends in our field like diversity and inclusion. I want to talk to you about this. Now in biggest company, they start having a department dedicated to this, to diversity and inclusion. And in Africa, due to their historical aspect, they have this already in their process. How you need, for example, to include minority in your workforce and how to get them engaged. So this is really something important, because it's not, again, we are not just here to read regulation. Anyone can read it in his home. We don't have to go in webinar to read the regulation. But we need to think all together and observe the trend in our pharma industry and be ready for it. So today we are proposing to you a training curriculum. Rafa will ask you to vote. You can propose other topic. We are at your disposal. You can say also what is the level of detail you want that we take you to. And we will take it from there to build a training curriculum and plan additional session. That was all from my side today, but of course, I will remain connected to answer your question. I'm not going to disconnect. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. It was really informative, concise, and comprehensive. Thank you so much. I will go through the questions, but I will let the people who would like to talk to unmute themselves first. Dr. Mona Mosley, she would like to, she has an input. So please, Dr. Mona, the mic is yours.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Salma, for joining us today. And thank you, Rafa, for the nice moderation and introduction when the session started. It was a very valuable information for regulatory people to understand where clinical study, how is it a part of what we do and how we do as a regulator, and the guidance. Thank you very much. And thank you for answering all the questions. I think you will be having a few questions, Rafa, on site, right?
Yes.
Thank you again.
Thanks, Doctora.
Thank you, Doctor. So you can keep posting your questions. And meanwhile, I'd like to ask you a question. Have you attended any IVPN network activity earlier or before? Please write Y or N, yes or no, while we are answering the questions so that we can use it for the upcoming sessions. So, Doctor, shall we start with the questions?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so for the first question, for a vaccine clinical study, is it acceptable to submit a phase 2 and phase 3 in parallel to be conducted, knowing that phase 1 is still in progress with only preliminary safety data?
It depends on the country. Some country will allow it. For example, UAE, they don't allow phase 1 now. Even not in a vaccine trial, no, even in other drug, they don't allow it. And there is something also important to keep in mind in our region again. We have some mature health authority, but others, they are still need some support, reinforcement. So one of their main interest when you submit a clinical trial, they will ask if the sponsor is conducting the trial in his country of origin. So I had in the past a sponsor, it was for a medical device. They wanted to do a phase 1 directly in UAE, while it was a sponsor coming from Canada. So of course, the first question, even from our side, was why you are not running this trial in your country? Don't forget what I told you before. The ethical principle means imagine this trial in your family. Will you accept it if they don't have enough data in other human?
No.
So, but of course, for vaccine trial, it happened that we submitted phase 2 and 3. We had already phase 1 result. It was not possible that we don't have even phase 1 result. But even when we submitted both of them, we committed to provide already the DMC report, meaning the Data Monitoring Committee. This is an independent committee following the safety and efficiency of the trial independently. So we provided this report to show that we are not taking risk, and we committed that we will provide the clinical study report upon its release. So it was a kind of negotiation. And this is also something really important in regulatory. Again, nothing is written in stone. When you have a special situation, you need to go and knock on the door of people that will take the decision. Don't stay with it. Now I give you this answer, but maybe if I ask a health authority, they will say yes or no, or there is always a way to negotiate, because what we want in our region is to fight for our flag and population. We have a lot of poor countries. They can't afford this medication. Some trials are conducted in biotherapy. These are highly expensive drugs. The only way for some patient to access a drug is to join a clinical trial. So if we agree together with health authority that it's going to be something good for the patient, we will find a way how to document and get approval. But we never compromise with the safety of our population. Never.
Okay. So phase 1, it should be done. It cannot be compromised there, but 2 and 3, they can be in parallel.
They do it through you. We need it's a kind of arrangement, let's say.
Yeah.
But we can also stop at any time. If we are going to do them in parallel, we can stop at any time.
Okay. So I hope this answered your question. If you want further elaboration, please do not hesitate to write like more details about the question. So the next question, there is awareness for clinical trials. How many clinical trials have in oncology? I think like are the oncology clinical trials somehow of like high number? I think this what is meant by the question, if I'm not mistaken.
Based on my experience in the region, I spent 12 years working in Middle East and Africa. Oncology trials are not the highest one in terms of number. Our region attracts more rare disease trial because unfortunately it can be called a disease rare in worldwide, but in our region usually we find family, for example, of beta thalassemia population. Due to the fact that people are getting married with a cousin or something from their family. So this increases the chances to get the mutation impacting the kids. But oncology, we still have a lot to do. I saw more, it was in breast cancer. Most of the trial in oncology I took part to it was in breast cancer.
Because even breast cancer, it's the highest in the like the causing the majority of cancer incidents are for breast cancer. It goes for breast cancer in the region, so maybe because of that.
Yes, but also let's keep in mind again, when we sponsor is thinking of our region, many times it's because they can't find patient in their location in Europe, USA. So cancer is present everywhere.
Yeah.
They come to our country, as I told you, beta thalassemia. It's highly prevalent in our region. Or other rare disease. I've worked in disease that even I can't spell their name because it was so complex. But for Fabry disease, many kind of diseases, sickle cells.
Infectious diseases, Ebola and so on, maybe.
Yeah, of course, meningitis, yellow fever, Lassa fever, things that we never heard about when we were in the pharmacy student.
Yeah. Okay, so I think this question is done. Rahaf asked, after the pandemic, can we say the future of clinical trials will take shorter time, or the future clinical trials will take shorter time?
Definitely. Because we did show that we can do it quicker than previously.
I have a question regarding this. Like, is it the efficiency or the fast track efficiency, is it related to infrastructure, or it's overloading the health professionals, or it's optimizing the process? Like where the play was in order to fasten the process?
Of course, they were more loaded. We had to hold meeting late at night, weekend. The situation was, it was an emergency situation, an expected one. Certainly, if we want to go faster, we need to be more engaged. But if it's only about manpower, because people will get tired,
Doctor,
hire
your
more.
voice went, I think.
Can you hear me?
If it's not from my side. Can you hear me?
I'm hearing you.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, now I can hear you, yes.
Great. So I told you, if it's only a problem of manpower, health authority, they can hire additional people. It's not, I don't think that we are lacking qualified professional in our region. Plus, let me tell you, in Africa, due to their history and the fact they got impacted by so many diseases before, they had a system in place for joint submission, call it the AVRF. This system was put in place by the World Health Organization, and they are acting as facilitator. Africa was ready for the pandemic. It's strange, but they were ready.
The capacity was built already. So
exactly. They had this platform, a nice one, managed and facilitated by the WHO. But what was missed is you start submitting and they are all here, but at certain time you lose them. Because again, it's a little bit cultural aspect.
Yeah.
In our region, I don't want to go to general conclusion, but yes, we are less sensitive to timeline.
Yeah, punctuality.
I told you, for example, in some country during Eid, they might leave 10 days, 2 weeks, no backup, because they are just celebrating Eid. مش ممكن.
Yes.
What we need to keep in mind that as long as disease exists, we need to work and deliver. Because the disease, the problem of the patient will not stop when you are in vacation.
Yes. Urgency, sense of urgency.
Of course. And we can't say COVID was an important disease and other no.
Yeah.
Imagine your kid had this disease. You need to find a solution.
True. Okay, so I think this question is done as well. Moving to the next question. How does one go about starting a career in clinical trial regulations? I have experience in medical devices regulations, but interested in clinical trials. What are the trainings needed to start, and what are some entry-level jobs? Also, is the MENA region clinical trial area growing? Thank you.
It's more and more attractive, the region, yes. Less, of course, than Europe, US, there are less clinical trial, but we are seeing a huge increase in the interest. So there is a future in this field. And of course, as long as there will be drug, we will have work to do. I know that I will have clinical trial to manage as long as I'm not retired. Especially when you work in a clinical research organization. A clinical research organization means it's a service provider for pharma company in a clinical trial. So they pharma outsource the work to this kind of company to do the job for them. So when you are in such an organization, you know that you will have work all the time, because you don't work in a specific therapeutic area or molecule. You work for anyone that will pay the price for the service. Yeah. So in our region, there are some kind of training. I know that there is a training delivered in Alexandria, for example, in Tunisia. I don't recall any famous one or better one. They are all equivalent. But what is good is that it's not mandatory. For example, in Europe, you can't start career in clinical trial without being trained and having certification. In our region, this is not mandatory. The resource, they can be trained through experience. They start fresh graduate. The entry level usually is clinical trial associate or study coordinator for people that want to work in an institution. Then they gather kind of experience, and they can apply or be promoted internally.
And this is both in pharmaceutical industries plus the CRO, like the clinical research organizations, right?
Let's be clear, there are few positions in the pharma. The trend from years and years worldwide is that pharma outsource this work to the CRO.
Okay.
Especially the biggest name, Novartis, Roche, all these big name, they are no more doing the job by themselves. Because the fact that they outsource it gives them flexibility. If, for example, they decide that they will not continue development of a drug, they just need to stop a contract with a provider. They don't have to fire people. And also during the performance of clinical trials, they don't have to give you all the benefit they are giving to their employee. They just pay you through hourly rate.
Yes. Outsourcing. So exactly. The CRO is the answer, like for the entry level job.
Yes.
Okay. So I think this question also is done. Okay, the next question, for the companies based in GCC, country of origin GCC, where do they conduct phase 1 studies?
Company based in GCC but usually they are doing, they are not inventing a new drug. They are, it's more generic. And I know that, for example, in Jordan, there are very good sites of bioequivalence study. So when we are talking about biosimilar or generic, we are no more talking about phase 1, because you are just changing part of the formula. You are not changing the active ingredient or targeting a new indication.
Bioequivalence.
Exactly. So in Jordan, there is a very good site of bioequivalence. Or they can do it in India. India, they have very good site also.
Okay. I think this is done also.
I just recall also that I think in Egypt 2 years ago, they launched kind of 13 bioequivalence center also.
Okay. So it's really growing then.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So our clinical trials have to be done for medical devices for diagnosis in vitro, please?
Yes. And this question came in the right moment, because from 2021 there is a new regulation in Europe, but it impacts the whole world. It's called the MDR, Medical Device Regulation, and the IVDR. There is a training that I'm proposing just to cover this, because it's no more easier to sell your product in Europe if you don't stick with the requirement of this regulation. And within this new release, what we observed that some country in our region, they already started by releasing their new regulation. Already UAE, they included the medical device in their guideline. But Saudi Arabia in 2021, they released a dedicated guideline just for running clinical trial in medical device. So it's coming. It's on the way.
The pipeline.
Yeah.
Okay. So since we got this this question about medical devices, you reminded me about the agenda. I'll be posting the question so that you can choose from the. We will take the last question, but meanwhile, please vote which topics you would like to go for, and also whether you want the sessions to be like only general overview or in depth or in detail. We would love to hear that from you before deciding and finalizing the agenda. So thank you, Dania, for the question. We will move to the last question. Is shortening the duration of a clinical trial still provides reliable data when it comes to safety and drug efficacy? I wanted to ask this question actually.
Yes. It depends. It depends really, because there is a reasonable way to shorten something. I can't hide that what was done in COVID-19 vaccination for someone, for example, like me, was a bit strange. I can say even unacceptable. Because, yes, how can we get enough data in such a short timeline, even for stability of the formulation? Usually stability tests need minimum 6 months. So I was asking myself, when did they manufacture this vaccine? Did they knew about the pandemic before it started? Or how come they are sure about the formulation? Did they got it through our stability tests? So we are pharmacists. It's hard for us to accept something like you need to put it, I don't know, in high level of temperature and lower level and can be reduced. And this is why currently we are seeing lots of articles about side effects.
So they took the risk anyway, and they like marketed the products without,
This is why it was called emergency use. It wasn't a full marketing authorization.
Yeah, that was very interesting. I enjoyed the session so much. Thank you so much. I hope we have answered. I think there is a question in the chat. Let me double check so that we don't miss it. Yeah, there is. So we will just take them and close. Is the preclinical trial means phase 0 is necessary?
Of course, it's not phase 0 in human. It's a preclinical mean. Usually it's in vitro or in animals. So of course, usually they never get a drug directly. They just manufacture and give it to a human. They need at least to test it in cells or in animals. I'm sad for animals, but if you have to decide about giving it to a human or an animal, the choice is a bit easy.
Okay. So the other question, please explain about phase 0, which is in animal. We have time now, or you think it's better to add it to the agenda, like
for preclinical trials?
Yeah.
No, I can answer now. It's the same principle like in human, meaning they will conduct pharmacokinetic, pharmacodynamic trial in animal, in pig, in monkey, in rabbit, in mouse. So it's the same thing.
Okay.
So they will deliver to them the drug through different dose, and they will take blood, or I don't know which system it is supposed to impact, and they will see where it's going, how it is distributed, eliminated, the same thing.
Okay, so the last question before closing, for the companies based in GCC country, yeah, she mentioned it in the questions. We already answered that. I hope we answered all your questions. If there are more, please send them to us via email, or we can when we meet next time. Thank you so much for joining. I'd like, on behalf of Journal Club Listserv and Regulatory Affairs Listserv, I'd like to thank you so much for being with us today. And we hope to see you in next sessions. Thank you so much, Dr. Salma. It was very nice having this session with you, and thank you for accepting our invitation.
The pleasure is for me. Thank you. Have a good night, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bislama.